All right, so we're going to get started again. And last time we left off, we were talking about the causes of World War II. Obviously, appeasement was a big part of that. Everything from Hitler's rise, Mussolini, and we went through the Blitzkrieg idea, Battle of France, and really talked about how bad things got, and then we saw the rise of Winston Churchill. And with Winston Churchill, of course, we know him from his famous speeches and all these very dramatic speeches. But before we go on to the other important information that happened, Battle of Britain and so forth, I just want to share with you another side of Winston Churchill, because Winston Churchill was also known for being pretty funny. He had these little one-liners that he often said, and I just want to share a couple with you. So you guys remember Neville Chamberlain, right? Neville Chamberlain, who, Munich conference and all that, appeased Hitler. So he actually died right during the World War II was happening and everything. And somebody went to Churchill and said, "What do you do with Neville Chamberlain now?" And Churchill's response was, what does he say? He says, "Embalm, cremate, and bury. Take no chances," right? So just don't come back again. So he's kind of just never liked Neville Chamberlain. Or Switzerland, Switzerland is always known for being neutral in every war and never getting involved. And so he says, look at the Swiss. They've enjoyed peace for centuries. And what have they produced? The cuckoo clock. That's kind of funny. There is this from General Montgomery. General Montgomery, very famous World War II general. And one day Montgomery goes to Churchill, "I neither drink nor smoke, and I'm 100% fit." To which Churchill responds, "I both drink and smoke, and I'm 200% fit." Because, of course, Churchill was always known for drinking and smoking and all of that. Churchill on his 75th birthday, "I'm ready to meet my maker. Whether my maker is prepared for the greater deal of meeting me is another matter." So that's fine. And then these are my two favorites. There's a man named George Bernard Shaw. He was a very famous playwright at the time. And one day he sends a telegram. He says to Churchill, "I am reserving 2 tickets for you to my premiere. Come and bring a friend if you have one." Churchill responds to George Bernard Shaw saying, "Impossible to be present for the first performance. We'll attend the second if there is one." And then my all-time favorite, there was a woman named Nancy Astor, and her and Churchill were having this big argument back and forth, and finally Nancy got really upset with him. She goes, "Winston, if I were your wife, I'd put poison in your coffee." To which Churchill responded, "Nancy, if I were your husband, I'd take it." So anyways, those are a few little one-liners by Churchill. All right, so back to the serious stuff. And of course, we start with this Battle of Britain. Now, the Battle of Britain is without a doubt the most significant battle up to this point in World War II, because it's going to, be at a place where Hitler's basically been able to achieve everything he wanted to do. And when we talk about the Battle of Britain, the British were really unsure how this was going to go. They were so concerned that actually before the Battle of Britain began, the British had prepared tens of thousands of coffins because they anticipated so many people dying. They had also took down all the street signs in England in case Germany landed and invaded. If they take down the street signs, the Germans would go around England. Well, there's no street signs, they don't know where they are. So that's how much worry there was. They did get all the, they were getting the troops back from the battle after the Dunkirk, little ships of Dunkirk, but now how do they deal with Hitler? So keeping in mind what is different about Britain as opposed to the rest of Europe, of course, is that Britain is an island. And unlike the rest of Europe, if Hitler's going to invade England, he has to get across the English Channel. And so he had a plan, something called Operation Sea Lion, right? So this is all part of the Battle of Britain story I want you to know. Operation Sea Lion. Operation Sea Lion was Hitler's plan to basically kind of do D-Day in reverse, try to, take this massive amphibious attack from northern control France, which he controls now, to invade Britain and conquer Britain and, get his men there and conquer the island of Britain. Now, to do that, Hitler's got a problem. And the problem he has is the British, not just Navy, but the British Air Force. If you send your Navy across the English Channel, all I have to do is send my planes over and bomb the Navy, and then, Hitler doesn't get any men there. And Hitler knows that. And so when the Battle of Britain begins, it's really an air battle. That's the key thing about this battle you want to know. So before Hitler can launch Operation Sea Lion, he has to break the British Air Force. The British Air Force known as the RAF, or the Royal Air Force, abbreviated the RAF. The German Air Force, of course, which you also want to know, is known as Luftwaffe, right? The Luftwaffe, that's the German Air Force. And initially, when this Battle of Britain began, the Luftwaffe outnumbered the RAF 3-1. So on top of all the other problems the British were having, they were outnumbered 3-1 at this particular point in the war, in terms of their planes. And so what Hitler's plan was simply, initially when the Battle of Britain was to begin, destroy the RAF planes and destroy the landing fields, the airfields, the British airfields. If he could blow up the airfields, blow up enough RAFs, then the British Air Force can't control over the English Channel, and then he could, launch Operation Sea Lion. The British did have two advantages, and the two advantages the British had: one, they had better pilots with probably better planes, the Hurricane and the Spitfire planes that they were using, but they also had a new invention, the British. They had the radar, and at least with radar, they knew when the Germans were coming. And that at least gives them a chance. Now, I want you to understand, even with radar, by the time a radar detects, hey, German plane's coming, it's not like you have hours. You basically have about 40 minutes to get from wherever you are into flying altitude to meet the German planes. So let this sink in. What if there's attack at night and you're sleeping? Well, you got to wake up, you got to get in your gear, you got to get into your plane, you got to get up into flying altitude to meet the Germans before they shoot, they attack you. That's not that easy to do. So what you ended up having is British Air Force pilots basically going with almost no sleep, literally sleeping in their gear, so they have to get there right away. If there's a siren in the middle of the night, they can get in their planes and go. And so these RAF pilots really sacrificed a lot during World War II. And so as the Battle of Britain begins, and again, usually we're talking about all this about August 1940, June, July, about August 1940, this whole story starts. And what we're seeing is, even though the British are outnumbered 3-1, they start destroying more Luftwaffe planes. In fact, let me give you a couple numbers here. As the Battle of Britain began, the Germans lost 2,600 planes, the RAF lost 600 planes. So even though they're outnumbered, the British are shooting down a lot more of the Luftwaffe planes. Now, that's not the end of the story of the Battle of Britain, because then what happens, Hitler sees he can't defeat the RAF pilots mano a mano, so what he does then is changes the plan, and he goes from targeting the RAF planes and targeting the airfields to simply flying his planes into England and bombing the cities, especially, of course, London. This is known as the Blitz. Where at one point, for 70 nights in a row, the city of London is going to be bombed, day in and day out, going to be bombed. And this is part of Hitler's plan. If he can't break the RAF, the planes, he'll break the morale of the British people. That's the idea behind it. And he starts bombing them. And this is the thing. He couldn't do it. He could not break the morale of the British people. Why not? Well, because they just would not bend. The phrase was, we can take it. No matter what Hitler did to them, we could take it. Very important. And it wasn't just people like Churchill. One of the great stories we get out of this is the story of the Queen's mom, Queen Elizabeth today, Queen Elizabeth II, of the Queen of England. Her mom was alive, of course, during World War II. In fact, her mom died, it was a while back, but she lived till 102, 103 years of age, so she lived a long time too. And anyways, her mom was the matriarch of the family. The king was the king, she was married to the king, and Queen Elizabeth II's mom. And when the war began, people went to Queen Elizabeth and said, hey, take the kids, get them out of here, it's not safe here. And she was like, nope, I'm not going anywhere. Not only did she refuse to leave, during World War II, she was known for sleeping in air raid shelters. She was known as the Luftwaffe planes are still circling to go where places were bombed and meet the people. And at one point, Buckingham Palace was bombed. And when Buckingham Palace was bombed, she was happy. She comes out and she's good. I could look the East Side in the face, basically saying the East Side, the poorer neighborhoods, your home has been bombed, my home has been bombed. We are really in this thing together. And that attitude really resonated with the British people, that she's there. She even took revolver lessons. I'll shoot the Germans if they invade. And so stuff like that really kind of showed that there were many people in this together. And so as this goes on for months, this Battle of Britain, Hitler failed. He could not break the RAF, and he could not break the will of the British people. And therefore, the British people survived this Battle of Britain. Operation Sea Lion never took place. I'm going to show you a few pictures here that I want to see. Let me just explain the pictures and then you'll kind of, I'll pop them up for you here. But just so these are going to see some images of the bombings that took place, kind of images of how people, you know, business as usual. You'll see one picture says just business as usual, that they were able to go on and work, and you'll see the devastation. And you'll see this other photo of the air raid shelter and where they're stuck in the shelters. And I want you to see how they're smiling. And that's very important because it shows even in this time of crisis, people were still able to find happiness and find, you know, staying positive, which I think is really amazing during that war period. You'll see a picture of Queen Elizabeth when she was a daughter, and you'll also see this picture of like a shot down plane. And when you see this picture of shot down plane, it actually reminds me of the story of an old neighbor of mine who passed away years ago, but he lived in England. He was 5 years old during the Blitz, and he told me that kids in England, they would play a game where they would find the shrapnels from these planes that were shot down, and they would collect them, like kids collect baseball cards and trade them or whatever, right? And so that's kind of a 5-year-old's child. So let me just kind of step aside here. We'll pop up some pictures for you so you can get some images of the Battle of Britain and what I just described to you here, okay? So take a look at all these images, and that should probably be good. And you can see all of those images there from the Battle of Britain. Okay, so anyways, and you can always go back if it didn't give you enough time, go back and pause and look at them again if you'd like. All right, so that's June, July, August, September. You know, we're moving into October 1940, right? All of this is going on, and Hitler can't break England. So now what? Well, that's not the end of World War II at all. He can't break England, but he's got the rest of Europe. And Hitler then decides to move on to his next plan. Since he couldn't break Britain, what he then decides to do is go after another piece of real estate. And you go, well, what's left? Well, if we look at our map here again, let's pop up our World War II map here again. All right, just a real quick refresher of our World War II map. All right, and we looked at that map. There was, of course, one area that Hitler still wanted, which he didn't have, which was Russia. And you go, Russia? I thought he had a non-aggression pact with Russia. Well, he did, but Hitler lied. No surprise. His intention was always to conquer Russia. And so we get to June of 1941. This is a year after the Battle of France. The Battle of Britain is already gone. Hitler couldn't break the British, so he decides to invade Russia in what is called Operation Barbarossa. Now, this was a massive onslaught into Russia, and quite surprisingly, the Russians weren't that well prepared for this. And you could see on that map, if you want to go back and look at it for a second, how fast and deep he moves into Russian territory very quickly. Stalin, of course, is going to get his men organized. He's going to start fighting back, and it's going to be brutal. One of the things we always know about Hitler is his just pure brutality, his evil nature, but Stalin, of course, was just as evil. You know, many people don't know this, but during World War II, the way Stalin fought Hitler is he would send 2 Russian soldiers with one gun. Why? Because he didn't care about his people. He figured, well, I'll send 2 soldiers, 1 gun, 1 dies, the other picks up the gun and keeps on going. That was the mentality, right? And using that methodology, he was fighting Hitler. It was brutal. Just to give you one sense of this, there's a city called Leningrad, and in the city of Leningrad, before World War II began, the city of Leningrad had a population of 3.5 million people. By the time we get to 1944, 4 or 5 years in the war, when the Russians are already in this war, the city of Leningrad had 750,000 people in it. Not everyone was killed, right? But, you know, I think it was about 1 million people killed, and then everybody else ended up fleeing. But just that's in one city. Just really absolutely mind-blowing numbers when you think about that during World War II period. So he's fighting there, Hitler, against the Russians, and at first he's doing really well, again, June 1941, but then the months go on, and we get into August, September, October 1941, November, December 1941. And of course, what's going to start happening as we get into the winter months, the Soviets are going to be able to start fighting back a bit. And we've seen this story before. If you guys remember, right before the midterm, before all this happened, Napoleon, right? And what was the deal with Napoleon? Napoleon couldn't break the British Navy, remember Lord Nelson, and so he had to turn his attention to Russia. Winter hit, and Napoleon was completely destroyed. In this case, it's similar in the sense that Hitler could not destroy the RAF, so this time he attacks Russia, winter's going to hit, and it's going to eventually lead to the downfall. Now, unlike the Napoleon story, if you remember, Napoleon fell fairly quickly. With Hitler in World War II, even as the Russians are fighting back, Hitler's so entrenched in Europe, it's not going to end quickly at all. But that is where we get to by the time we're in about November, December 1941. Now, December 1941, that should also resonate with everyone, because what else happens in December of 1941? Pearl Harbor. I usually, when I do this in class, I have this Google Earth and I show the Google Earth image of the Pearl Harbor site. It's absolutely stunning. If you've never been to Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, one of those must things to do. If you go to Hawaii, definitely go see Pearl Harbor. And you should all know the date of that, December 7th, 1941. I'm assuming you all know it. And that's when World War II is going to now, the United States is going to be now involved in World War II. And so let's do this. Let's kind of backtrack a bit now. So now what I want to do is kind of pause for a second in Europe, right? So we're going to kind of pause in Europe. And now what I want to do is pick up with World War II, how it starts at the Pacific and what leads to Pearl Harbor. Okay? All right. So World War I in the Pacific and Pearl Harbor. So remember the causes. So some of this stuff I'm going to go through very quickly because we've really covered this. Japan didn't wake up one day and say, hey, let's go attack Pearl Harbor, right? What has been going on is that for about 1900, even a little before that, there was tension between U.S. and Japan. First cause of the war in the Pacific, Japan. Japan was an imperialistic power, brutal leadership, again, performing things like the rape of Nanking. These are these horrible atrocities that we associate with Japan at the time. If you don't have that, you never have World War II in the Pacific. So that's key. Then there were other things that just specifically created tension between the United States and Japan that we had talked about. The open door policy, the Washington Conference, the Stimson Doctrine. I'm not going to go through all that again. It's all in your notes, should be in the other lectures. Make sure you know it. And you can see how these are causes of World War II in the Pacific. There was one more thing I had not mentioned that is worth mentioning in the 1930s that really helped trigger Pearl Harbor, and that was when the U.S. imposed an oil and steel embargo on Japan. And for Japan, you know, they saw this as a pure act of war. What do you mean you're not going to let it have oil or steel? They're trying to suffocate them. And so as a result of that, you know, they planned this attack against Pearl Harbor. So Pearl Harbor happened, and of course, when this happened, this is going to easily draw the United States in the war. It was brutal. What I'm going to do here is just show you some images here. So I'm just going to move aside, and I'm going to just pop up several images of the attack on Pearl Harbor, just so you get a sense of what's going on. And then the last image I just want to show you is a map of the Pacific. So here are a bunch of pictures first, and then a map of the Pacific. Okay, so hopefully you saw some pretty dramatic images there of the Pearl Harbor attack and the Pacific and so forth, and that's where we are right now. So you saw that map, and this now brings the U.S. into the war. When the U.S. entered the war, just, you know, pretty crazy stories here that I want to share with you. One of the things that is really, I think, astonishing is the generation of Americans who went through this war. And I have another neighbor, older neighbor, and she told me these stories. She's still alive. She's 94 now, and I think she was like in high school when Japan was attacked. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and she tells me these stories about like when she was in high school that they had an auditorium meeting the week after the Pearl Harbor was attacked, and they're talking to all the high school students and all this, and she said after this the high school students were told what happened, they basically, the boys got up and left the auditorium. Where did they go? They went to enlist. Again, this is high school. She said in her graduating high school class there were only 2 boys because all the men went into the army, and some of them weren't even 18, but it's like, hey, no one's gonna ask. Another thing that, that I think is pretty amazing is that during World War II, remember this is on the heels of the Great Depression, you couldn't just go and buy whatever you want because there was severe rationing. We go to our stores today, it's like, oh no, I can't find a little toilet paper, and everyone freaks out, right? No, we're talking about real rationing to the point where every family was given ration books. And in fact, she had some of these ration books, and she said, David, do you want these? I'm like, yes. And so she gave me these World War II ration books. See if we can make it close up so you guys can see those. Right? These are the World War II ration books you could see here. And you would open them up and you could see different things you would be able to buy, wheat or sugar or whatever it was. And you would have these ration books, and once you're out, you're out. And so you have to be very careful on what you could buy. So that, again, that's pretty amazing, I think, that they went through this. And they all did it very willingly. And so, they all kind of did what they needed to do to fight this World War II period against Japan. Once, of course, the U.S. is at war with Japan, and then this is also going to eventually draw the U.S. to war with Germany, and now the United States is in a war fighting with England and Russia, of course, which is a bit crazy because if you stop and you think about it, that means the United States is now fighting with Stalin, as is England. They're all now allies, and people go, how can we have fought with Stalin? He's such an evil monster. Well, Winston Churchill once said about this, he goes, if Hitler invaded hell, I'd have a few nice things to say about the devil. And the reality is, that's what happens in life, in history sometimes. Sometimes you just have to deal with the situation at hand, and yes, even if it means fighting with Stalin, it doesn't mean after the war is over, you don't turn your attention and try to deal with the evils of communism, but at that moment, they said, hey, we got to join with Stalin to fight Hitler. So with that, all that happened. One other quick note, I hate even spending time on this, but I always do. Some of you at some point may have heard that, the United States let Pearl Harbor be attacked so we can get into the war. That's utter nonsense. It's one of these crazy conspiracy theories. It doesn't make any sense at all. One, there's no evidence of it. Two, it also doesn't make sense that you're going to allow your fleet to be destroyed, that then you're going to need to fight a war. It doesn't make sense at all. And the conspiracy people go, well, some of the ships were out in patrol, and not all the ships were in Pearl Harbor, and of course not all the ships were in Pearl Harbor at any given time. You're never going to have every ship in your Navy base at the same time. That's ridiculous. And so it's just one of these kind of crazy conspiracy theories. Were there mistakes made? Should the United States have been more prepared for a possible attack? Yes. It's kind of like 9/11. Should we have been better prepared for 9/11? Should we have known something like that could happen at some point based on all the intel and based on all the other Al-Qaeda attacks? Yes. But was there some conspiracy in the United States to let 9/11 happen? Of course not. These are just insane people who think like the moon landing didn't happen. So if you hear that anywhere, it's just crazy talk. All right. Anyways. So the U.S. is now in the war. Now, once the U.S. gets into the war, so we understand how the war started in the Pacific. You saw the map of the Pacific just to give you a sense that earlier about the areas that that U.S. was dealing with Japan. We'll come back to the Pacific more a little bit later. What I want to do now is shift back to Europe.